At the will reading in our family estate in Clearwater, my older brother Connor stood up like he'd already won, straightened his tie, and announced with that smug grin he's perfected since childhood. Mom and Dad have decided, along with Grandma Eleanor, to leave all 12 commercial properties in Florida to me. Marin, you'll receive a small cash settlement. Fair is fair. The room erupted. Applause, whistles. Someone even shouted, "About time." Aunts clinked glasses. His fiancée, Paige, squeezed his arm like she'd just landed a trophy husband. And Mom wiped her eyes with that proud little sniffle she saves for Connor's greatest hits. I didn't clap. I didn't even flinch. I just looked across the table at Grandma Eleanor, sitting quietly in her wheelchair, oxygen tube resting under her nose, eyes sharp as ever beneath those silver curls. Then I took a deep breath and said, calm as still water, "Grandma, do you want to tell them yourself, or should I?" Her thin lips curled into a smile. Connor's grin vanished like someone had slapped it off. Paige's champagne glass froze halfway to her mouth. Dad's fork clattered onto his plate. 38 people suddenly went dead silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, and in that single second, every single person in that room knew that whatever they thought was about to happen had just been erased. Before I tell you exactly what Grandma Eleanor said next, and how the rest of that afternoon burned their perfect little plan to ashes, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I always like knowing I'm not the only one who sat in a room full of people who swore they loved you right before they showed you what you were really worth to them. Hit that like button if you've ever had to sit quietly while your entire family celebrated your erasure. Because trust me, what happened next made every single one of them wish they'd never clapped at all. Now, let me take you back to how we got here. My name is Marin Calloway, and if you'd met my family before that will reading, you'd probably think we were living the Florida dream. Waterfront property in Clearwater, boat slips at the marina, Christmas photo shoots on the beach every December with matching white linen shirts. But those photos never showed the invisible scoreboard that ruled everything behind closed doors. Connor has always been the son everyone noticed first. From the moment he could walk, he walked into the center of every room and stayed there. First to speak at dinners, first to be forgiven after mistakes, first to be believed when stories conflicted. Little League MVP, homecoming king, the son who stayed local after college and stepped right into managing Grandma Eleanor's commercial real estate portfolio like it was his birthright. Every family gathering ended with someone shaking his hand, telling him he was going to carry the Calloway name into the next generation. He absorbed it like sunlight, grew taller on it, never once questioned whether he'd earned any of it. I learned early that I existed in the margins he never bothered to read. Teachers confused our last names until Connor corrected them with that charming laugh. Birthday parties meant his friends got the pool first. His presents got opened while everyone watched. His stories got retold at dinner while mine stayed folded up inside my chest. When I asked for help with my college applications, Mom said she was too busy helping Connor network with Dad's business contacts. When I got accepted to Duke on a merit scholarship, Dad's only response was, well, at least someone's using their brain to get ahead. Like my achievement was a consolation prize for not being Connor. So I left. The day after graduation, I packed my entire life into a second-hand Jetta and drove north on I-95 until Florida was just humidity in my rearview mirror. Charlotte gave me the first deep breath I'd taken in 22 years. I started as a junior analyst at a commercial property firm uptown, buried in spreadsheets and lease agreements, learning how buildings become assets, how assets become leverage, how quiet, consistent work builds the kind of wealth that loud people never see coming. I stayed late, arrived early, asked questions that made senior partners notice me for the right reasons. I still came home, but only when Grandma Eleanor asked. She was the only person who never measured me against Connor. Never asked why I couldn't just stay close like your brother. She'd sit in her sunroom overlooking the bay, crocheting something she'd never finish, and listen to me talk about cap rates and tenant retention like they were the most interesting things she'd ever heard. Sometimes she'd hand me the keys to one of her properties and tell me to walk through alone, feel what ownership actually means, even if nobody else recognized it yet. Those visits kept me tethered to something real. She never called me the smart one or the independent one, the way relatives did when they wanted to sound fair. She just looked at me and said things like, "You see what's actually there, Maureen. Most people only see what they want." When I left on Sunday nights, she'd press a tin of homemade lemon cookies into my hands and remind me Charlotte was only 8 hours away, not another planet. Everyone else slowly stopped seeing me at all. Phone calls from Mom became texts about holidays. Dad only called when Connor needed a second opinion on some deal he was probably going to bungle anyway. I became the daughter who made her own way, which in the Calloway family meant the one nobody needed to invest in anymore. I didn't hate Connor for it. Hate takes energy I refuse to waste. I just accepted the weather. You don't argue with a hurricane. You board up your windows and rebuild somewhere the storm can't reach. Charlotte promoted me to Director of Acquisitions 3 years ago. I bought a townhouse in Dilworth with a garden I actually had time to tend, and built a life where my value wasn't determined by how I compared to someone else's highlight reel. The only anchor left was Grandma Eleanor. Every visit she moved a little slower, breathed a little harder, but her mind stayed diamond sharp. She started asking me more questions about trusts, about how to protect assets from people who inherit money without inheriting sense. I answered honestly, because she was the only one who never used my knowledge to benefit someone else. She got diagnosed with late-stage COPD 2 years ago. The doctors gave her months. She gave them her middle finger and kept going. But we both knew she was on borrowed time. That's who I was the day I drove back to Clearwater for what I thought was a routine visit, but turned into the beginning of everything that happened next, carrying 8 years of distance and one old woman's unbreakable faith that I was exactly who she thought I was. 4 years ago, everything changed without anyone knowing. 4 years ago, everything changed without anyone knowing. Grandma Eleanor called me on a Wednesday night and asked if I could come down that weekend. She didn't explain, just said she needed my professional eyes on something important. When I pulled into her circular driveway in Bel Air, she was sitting on the front porch in her wheelchair, 2 thick folders on her lap, and a pitcher of sweet tea sweating on the table beside her. She didn't bother with small talk. She wheeled over to the porch table, slid the first folder across, and told me to read. Inside were bank statements, property income reports, expense ledgers for all 12 commercial properties in her portfolio, strip malls, office buildings, a small medical complex. The numbers told a story that made my stomach clench. Over the previous 2 years, nearly $700,000 in rental income had been siphoned into categories labeled renovations, consulting fees, and management expenses. Receipts were missing or had been photocopied so many times they were impossible to verify. The handwriting on the few legible ones matched Connor's. She watched me flip through the pages, her jaw set tight. "I gave him the checkbook because he swore he was ready to take over," she said. Turns out taking over meant taking whatever he wanted, and assuming I was too old to notice. I asked the obvious question. Why not confront him directly? She shook her head slowly. Because your mother would make excuses. Your father would say boys make mistakes. Connor would promise to pay it back someday. And by the time someday arrives, there'll be nothing left to pay back. I've watched this family enable him his whole life. I'm done being part of it. That's when she opened the second folder. Inside were draft documents. A revocable living trust naming her as trustee, and upon her death or incapacitation, me as sole successor trustee and primary beneficiary of every single commercial property. 12 quit claim deeds ready to transfer title immediately. All she needed was my signature as the accepting grantee and 2 witnesses who weren't family members. She explained it like she was reading a grocery list. A living trust keeps everything out of probate. Private. No public records until it matters. Quit claim deeds transfer ownership instantly and permanently. Once they're recorded at the county clerk's office, they're done. Irreversible. My attorney drew these up 6 months ago. He's not the family lawyer, so nobody will ever see this paperwork unless I want them to. I asked why me. She looked out at the water, her breathing shallow but steady. Because you understand what these buildings actually are. They're not trophies. They're not toys. They're 47 businesses that pay rent so their employees can feed their families. 200-something jobs that depend on someone managing these properties like they matter. You won't drain them dry to fund a lifestyle you haven't earned. I tried to argue that Connor would completely lose his mind when he found out. She cut me off before I finished the sentence. That's exactly why he won't find out until it's too late to undo. That's the whole point. We spent the rest of the weekend going through every document line by line. She walked me through the trust provisions, showed me where to initial, made absolutely sure I understood that once those deeds were recorded, the properties were legally mine regardless of what anyone else believed or wanted. She even had me sign an acknowledgement that I understood the full implications, so there could never be a claim that I was confused or coerced. Monday morning, her attorney arrived at 10 sharp with a licensed notary who wasn't from Clearwater. We signed everything in the dining room, while the ceiling fan clicked overhead, and morning light streamed through the blinds. Grandma Eleanor's hand was steady. She didn't hesitate on a single page. When they left, she poured 2 glasses of sherry, even though it wasn't even noon, touched her glass to mine and said, "Now it's done, and now we don't speak of it again." She made me swear on her late husband's grave that I would never breathe a word until the day came when someone tried to take what was no longer theirs to give. I gave her my word. We burned the extra copies in the outdoor fireplace that night and watched the smoke curl into the palm trees until there was nothing left but ash. For the next 3.5 years, nothing looked different on the surface. Connor kept strutting around like he owned the portfolio, kept posting photos on social media with captions like, "Building the family legacy one deal at a time." Mom and Dad kept praising how responsible he'd become, how he was finally growing into his potential. I kept flying down from Charlotte every couple of months, walking through properties when Grandma asked, checking on tenants and making quiet notes about what actually needed fixing versus what Connor was billing for. Nobody noticed the county records now listed the owner of all 12 properties as Marin Calloway, because nobody ever thought to look. Why would they? Connor was the heir apparent. Everyone knew it. Everyone had always known it. Grandma Eleanor's health declined steadily after that. More oxygen, more doctor visits, fewer hours out of bed. But every single time I visited, she asked the same question in that quiet, conspiratorial voice. "Still our secret?" And every single time, I answered, "Still our secret." It became our ritual, our rebellion. 3 words that held the entire future. The last time I saw her before the will reading, she gripped my wrist with more strength than I thought she had left. "Remember," she whispered, "the truth only has power when you choose when to use it. You'll know the moment. Don't waste it." Then she smiled like someone who'd already seen how the story ended and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. 6 weeks ago, Mom called and said we needed to have a family meeting about Grandma Eleanor's estate. "She's getting worse," Mom said, voice soft like she was delivering tragic news. "We need to formalize everything while she's still coherent." I knew exactly what that meant. They wanted to lock down their version of the inheritance before anything could change. They wanted witnesses, documentation, a public ceremony that made everything feel official and irreversible. I almost said I couldn't make it, but something in Mom's tone told me this was the moment Grandma had been waiting for. So I cleared my calendar and booked a flight. The day of the meeting, the family estate looked like someone was throwing a wedding reception. White tents in the backyard, catering trucks in the driveway, a bartender setting up under the big oak tree like we were celebrating something wonderful. Valets in vests were parking cars. Someone had even hired a photographer. This wasn't a meeting. It was a coronation. Mom met me at the door in pearls and a dress I'd never seen before, arms open like we were in a commercial for family reconciliation. "You came. I'm so glad. Everyone's been asking about you." She hugged me too tight, perfume overwhelming, and whispered, "Please don't make this difficult." I didn't answer. I just walked inside. The living room was already packed. Aunts and uncles from Naples and Sarasota, cousins I hadn't seen in years, Dad's business partners, the family attorney Mr. Whitmore with his leather briefcase, even a few of Grandma Eleanor's church friends who looked confused about why there was champagne at what they thought was going to be a prayer circle. Connor stood by the fireplace in a sport coat and pocket square, Paige attached to his arm like a designer accessory. He lifted his whiskey glass when he saw me. Well, the prodigal sister returns. Wasn't sure you'd lower yourself to come all the way from Charlotte. I smiled politely. Wouldn't miss it. Paige looked me up and down, taking in my simple navy dress and flats. She was wearing heels so high she could barely walk, and a ring so big it had to be cubic zirconia. We're so excited, she gushed, her voice pitched loud enough for everyone to hear. Connor's been working so hard for this moment. He really deserves it. I nodded, like she'd said something meaningful, and moved past them toward the dining room. Grandma Eleanor was already seated at the head of the table in her wheelchair, oxygen concentrator humming softly beside her. She looked thinner than the last time I'd seen her, more fragile, but her eyes tracked me the moment I walked in. She didn't smile. She just gave me the tiniest nod, almost imperceptible, and I knew. Today was the day. I found a seat near the windows and watched the room fill with certainty. Everyone knew how this was going to go. The golden son would receive his golden inheritance, and the daughter who'd moved away would get a token settlement to keep things technically fair. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even considered an alternative. This was the Calloway script, the one they'd been rehearsing for 30 years, and they were all just here to watch the final scene play out exactly as expected. More guests arrived. The property manager Connor had hired last year came in looking tan and self-satisfied, shaking hands like he was running for office. Tenants from some of the commercial properties milled around looking uncomfortable in their church clothes, clearly invited as props to make Connor look like a benevolent landlord. Childhood friends of Connor's slapped his back and asked when he was going to start expanding the empire. I made small talk when cornered, accepted a glass of sparkling water, and watched the confidence swell until it filled every corner of the room. Paige floated past in a cloud of perfume, flashing her ring at anyone who'd look. "This is just the beginning," she told a cluster of aunts. "Connor has so many plans. New developments, new acquisitions. We're going to be set for life before we even have kids." Connor beamed beside her, arm around her waist, accepting congratulations like he was already signing the deeds. Not a single doubt in his face, not a single flicker of uncertainty. He believed, truly believed, that everything in this room was already his. I glanced at Grandma Eleanor. She was watching him too, expression unreadable, fingers resting calmly on the arm of her wheelchair. The living room hushed when Connor finally stepped forward to speak. He positioned himself beside Grandma Eleanor's wheelchair like he was accepting an award at a podium. Champagne flute raised high, voice projecting to every corner of the room. "First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate this incredible moment for our family," he began, flashing that practiced smile. "As most of you know, Grandma Eleanor has been the heart and soul of the Calloway family for decades. Her wisdom, her strength, her vision built everything we have today." Murmurs of agreement. Someone said, "Amen." Connor continued, his voice swelling with false humility. "It's been my honor to work alongside her these past few years, learning the business, managing the properties, preparing for the day when I'd be ready to take the reins. And today, that day has finally come." He turned to Dad, who nodded gravely like this was a solemn passing of the torch. "Mom and Dad, along with Grandma Eleanor, have made the decision to transfer full ownership and control of all 12 commercial properties to me," Connor announced, his smile widening. "This represents our family's legacy, everything Grandma built over 40 years, and I am humbled and honored to be the one trusted to carry it forward." The room erupted. Applause, cheers, glasses raised. Paige literally bounced on her heels. Aunts dabbed their eyes. Uncles nodded with that satisfied look men get when they see wealth successfully hoarded within the proper bloodlines. Connor held up a hand to quiet them, clearly loving every second. "Now, I know my sister Marin has built a good life for herself up in North Carolina, and we're all very proud of her independence." He said independence like it was a consolation prize. "She'll be receiving a generous cash settlement to ensure she's taken care of. Fair is fair. No one gets left behind in this family." More applause. Someone actually shouted "fair is fair" like it was a slogan. I sat completely still. Didn't clap, didn't react, didn't even blink. Mr. Whitmore, the family attorney, stepped forward with a leather portfolio. He opened it to reveal a stack of documents bristling with colored tabs. "I have the transfer paperwork ready for signatures," he said. "Once executed, the properties will officially be registered in Connor's name. We can complete everything this afternoon." Connor grinned wider. "Let's make it official." The room buzzed with excitement. People started moving forward to get a better look at the signing, like they were witnesses to history. Paige was already taking photos for Instagram. I took a breath, let it out slowly. Then I stood up. Every head turned. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the chatter like a blade, "I think we might be missing something." Connor's smile flickered. "Excuse me?" I looked at Mr. Whitmore. "Have you checked the county records recently? Verified current ownership of the properties?" He frowned. "I have the original deeds on file. The properties are registered to Eleanor Calloway. They have been for—" "They were," I interrupted gently, "until 4 years ago." The room went very quiet. Mom's champagne glass lowered slowly. Dad's brow furrowed. Connor's expression shifted from annoyed to something darker, more uncertain. I turned to look at Grandma Eleanor. She was watching me with those sharp eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Grandma," I said softly, "do you want to tell them yourself? Or should I?" The silence was absolute. You could hear the ice settling in glasses, the hum of her oxygen concentrator, someone's nervous swallow. Grandma Eleanor's smile widened. She reached over and patted my hand with her thin, papery fingers. "I think I'd like to tell them myself, dear," she said. Her voice was frail but perfectly clear. "I've been waiting quite a while for this particular moment." Connor stepped forward, face reddening. "Grandma, what is she talking about? What is this?" Eleanor Calloway looked up at her golden grandson with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was something closer to pity. "Sit down, Connor," she said quietly. "You're going to want to be sitting for this." He didn't sit. He stood there frozen, champagne glass trembling slightly in his hand. Grandma Eleanor took a breath, the oxygen hissing softly, and began to speak. "4 years ago," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room, "I asked Marin to come visit me. I had some concerns about how my properties were being managed. Some significant concerns." She paused, letting that land. "I won't bore everyone with the details, but let's just say that when I reviewed the books, I discovered that a substantial amount of money had gone missing. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, exposed into categories that didn't exist for work that was never done." Connor's face went from red to white. "Grandma, whatever you think you saw, I saw exactly what was there." She cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp as a knife. "I'm old, Connor. I'm not stupid. I know the difference between a legitimate expense and theft." The word hung in the air like smoke. Mom made a small, strangled sound. Dad looked like he'd been punched. Grandma Eleanor continued, her voice calm again. "At that point, I had a choice. I could confront Connor, involve your parents, hire lawyers, and spend whatever time I have left fighting with my own family. Or I could simply ensure that my assets went to someone I actually trust." She looked at me then, really looked, with something in her eyes that made my throat tight. I chose Marin. The room erupted, but not in applause this time. Gasps, whispers, someone's glass shattering on the floor. 4 years ago, Grandma Eleanor said, speaking over the chaos, I transferred complete ownership of all 12 properties to Marin. Quit claim deeds, fully executed and recorded with the county clerk. I also established a living trust naming her as my successor trustee and sole beneficiary. These documents have been legally binding for 4 years. The properties have not been mine to give away for 4 years. She folded her hands in her lap. So I'm afraid, Connor, that what you just announced is not only incorrect, it's impossible. You cannot inherit what I no longer own. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't just quiet. It was the complete absence of the future everyone in that room thought they were walking into. Mr. Whitmore recovered first. He stepped forward, face pale, and addressed Grandma Eleanor directly. "Mrs. Calloway, Are you saying these properties were transferred without going through this office? Eleanor nodded serenely. I used independent counsel, Marcus. Someone without ties to the family. I needed to ensure there would be no leaks. Mr. Whitmore looked like he might be sick. Do you have documentation? Eleanor glanced at me. Marin? I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd brought from Charlotte. Color-coded tabs, every signature notarized, every recording stamp verified. I set it on the table and opened it. 12 quitclaim deeds, I said, all recorded with Pinellas County 4 years ago, plus the complete living trust with schedule of assets. You're welcome to verify everything. Mr. Whitmore picked up the first deed, studied it, flipped to the recording stamp. His face told everyone in the room everything they needed to know before he even spoke. These are legitimate, he said slowly. Properly executed and recorded, Marin Calloway is the legal owner of all 12 properties. The room exploded, not in celebration this time. Connor threw his champagne glass against the wall. It shattered, spraying wine across a family portrait. This is insane, he shouted. She's senile. She didn't know what she was signing. I'll contest this in court. You'll what? Grandma Eleanor's voice cut through his tantrum like a scalpel. Prove I was incompetent? I had a full cognitive evaluation 2 weeks before I signed those documents. Passed with flying colors. My attorney has the results. Would you like to see them? Connor's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Mom stood up, tears streaming down her face. Mother, how could you do this to us, to Connor? He's devoted himself to those properties for years. He's devoted himself to stealing from me for years. Grandma Eleanor's voice rose for the first time, sharp and ringing. $700,000, Catherine. That's what your devoted son took from my accounts. $700,000 in fake expenses, phantom repairs, consulting fees paid to companies that don't exist. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was just going to let him drain everything dry and then hand him the keys? The silence was devastating. Dad tried to step in, his voice shaking. Eleanor, there must be some misunderstanding. Connor would never— I have the bank records, Gerald. Grandma's voice was ice now. I have the receipts. I have the canceled checks. This isn't an accusation. It's arithmetic. Dad closed his mouth. Grandma Eleanor turned back to Connor, who was standing frozen, face twisted with rage and shock. I gave you every chance, she said quietly. Every opportunity to prove you were ready for real responsibility. And you used it to line your pockets. You didn't earn this inheritance, Connor. You disqualified yourself from it. Connor's hands were shaking. He looked around the room wildly, searching for an ally, finding none. This isn't over, he snarled. I'll sue. I'll get those documents invalidated. I'll prove she was manipulated. By whom? I asked calmly. He spun toward me. By you. You've always been jealous, always trying to worm your way into what's mine. It was never yours, I said. That's literally the point. Connor lunged toward me, but Dad grabbed his arm. Let go of me, Connor shouted. She stole my inheritance. You stole $700,000, Dad said quietly. His voice sounded broken in a way I'd never heard before. We'll be lucky if you don't go to prison. That landed like a physical blow. Connor actually staggered. Paige, who'd been standing frozen this entire time, suddenly came to life. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Paige, Connor called after her. Where are you going? She didn't turn around. I'm going home, she said. To my parents' home. We're done, Connor. She walked out the front door. Nobody tried to stop her. A moment later, we heard her car start and pull away. Connor watched her go, then turned back to the room. His face was the face of someone watching their entire life collapse in real time. You, he snarled at me. You did this. You ruined everything. No, Grandma Eleanor said firmly. You ruined everything. Marin just made sure you couldn't ruin anything else. Connor stood there breathing hard, fists clenched, looking like he wanted to break something. Anything. Then he made a sound that was half sob, half scream, grabbed his car keys off the side table, and stormed out. The front door slammed so hard a picture fell off the wall. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Grandma Eleanor took a slow breath, smoothed her lap blanket, and looked around the room at all the shocked faces. "Well," she said calmly, "I believe there's still food in the backyard. No reason to let it go to waste." From the back of the room, I heard a sound. It took me a moment to realize it was laughter. My younger brother Nolan, who hadn't said a single word all afternoon, was laughing quietly into his hand. He looked up and caught my eye, shrugged. "She told me last year," he said simply, "made me promise to keep quiet until today." And with that, the frozen tableau finally broke. People started whispering, moving, processing. Some headed for the door. Others headed for the bar. Mom collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Dad stood alone by the window, staring at nothing. I walked over to Grandma Eleanor's wheelchair and knelt down beside her. "Thank you," I said quietly. She took my hand in both of hers. Her skin was paper thin, her grip surprisingly strong. "I should have done it years ago," she said. "I just kept hoping he'd change. People don't change, Marin. They just get better at hiding who they really are. You never hid. That's why I picked you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand and let the weight of the afternoon settle around us. The party, if you could still call it that, dissolved within the hour. The party, if you could still call it that, dissolved within the hour. Guests made excuses and fled. The caterers packed up their untouched shrimp platters and vanished. The photographer deleted his memory card and left without being asked. By 5 o'clock, the only people left in that big house were family, and even that word felt like it meant something different now. Mom hadn't stopped crying. She sat in the corner of the living room, mascara ruined, pearl necklace twisted in her fingers like rosary beads, looking at me like I was a stranger who'd just burned her house down. "How could you keep this from us?" she kept saying. "How could you let us plan all of this knowing it was a lie?" "I didn't let you plan anything," I said. "You never asked me what I knew. You never asked me anything." That landed harder than I expected. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Dad tried a different approach. He sat down across from me, hands clasped, voice controlled, doing his best negotiator impression. "Marin," he said carefully, "I understand you're upset. We all are. But we're still family. We can still fix this." "Fix what?" I asked. "This situation." He gestured vaguely at the room, the documents, the wreckage of the afternoon. "We can restructure the ownership. Put everything in a family trust, equal shares. That way everyone's protected and—" "No." The word stopped him cold. "These properties are mine," I said calmly. "Grandma gave them to me because she trusted me. I'm not going to restructure them into something that gives Connor access again." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're being vindictive. I'm being protective. There's a difference." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "This isn't the daughter I raised." "No," I agreed. "It isn't. Because the daughter you raised was invisible. This is who I became when I stopped waiting for you to see me." He didn't have an answer to that. He just stood up and walked away. Mr. Whitmore approached me near the dining room, leather portfolio clutched against his chest like a shield. He looked shell-shocked. "I'll need to review all the documentation," he said stiffly. "Verify everything with the county. Make sure there are no procedural issues that could—" "There aren't," I interrupted. "But you're welcome to check. You'll find that everything was done correctly. Grandma made sure of that." He nodded curtly and left without another word. I had the feeling his relationship with the Calloway family was about to get a lot more complicated. Nolan found me in the kitchen around 6 o'clock. He was pouring himself a bourbon and poured one for me without asking. "Hell of an afternoon," he said. I almost smiled. "When did she tell you?" "Last Thanksgiving." He took a sip and leaned against the counter. "She asked me to drive her to some lawyer's office in Tampa. Wouldn't tell me why. When she came out, she looked happier than I'd seen her in years. She made me promise not to say anything, and then she told me the whole story." "Did she tell you about the money? About what Connor took?" Nolan nodded slowly. "Yeah. She had all the records. Bank statements, Fake receipts, the whole trail. It wasn't even clever theft, Mayor. It was lazy. He just assumed no one would ever look, and no one did. Not until Grandma decided to look. He swirled his bourbon, watching the light play through it. You know the craziest thing? I think part of her was hoping she was wrong, hoping there'd be some explanation. She loved him. We all did. But she loved those properties more. Loved what they represented. 40 years of her life, you know? She wasn't going to let him piss that away on boats and bottle service. I looked down at my glass. I didn't even really like bourbon, but I drank it anyway. What happens now? Nolan asked. I take over. I've been studying the financials for 4 years. The portfolio's solid, just been mismanaged. I'll bring in new property managers, clean up the books, make sure the tenants are taken care of. It's not that different from what I've been doing in Charlotte. He nodded. And Connor? That's not up to me. I set my glass down. He stole $700,000. That's a crime. What happens next is between him and the law. Nolan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're going to have to decide whether to press charges. No, I said. I'm not. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean Grandma's the one he stole from. That's her decision, not mine. Nolan looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Just slightly. She really did pick the right person, didn't she? I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. Around 7 o'clock, I went to check on Grandma Eleanor. She was in her bedroom, oxygen machine humming, propped up on pillows watching the sunset through the window. She looked exhausted but peaceful. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. How are you feeling? She smiled without opening her eyes, like I just ran a marathon, but a good kind of tired. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Connor came to see me, before he left. I tensed. What did he say? He cried. She opened her eyes now, looking at me. Big heaving sobs. Said I'd ruined his life. Said he'd never forgive me. Said I was a cruel, vindictive old woman who'd turned his own sister against him. I felt my chest tighten. Grandma. She held up a thin hand. Then he asked me to change my mind. Said he'd pay back everything, double, if I'd just undo the transfer. When I said no, he called me names I won't repeat and stormed out. I didn't know what to say. The cruelty of it. The entitlement. Even at the end, he couldn't see past himself. Grandma Eleanor reached over and took my hand. I want you to understand something, she said. I didn't do this to punish Connor. I did it to protect what I built. There's a difference. I know. He had every chance to be different. I gave him responsibility, access, trust. He used all of it to take advantage. That's not something you can undo with tears and promises. That's character. And character doesn't change just because the consequences finally arrived. I nodded. She squeezed my hand. You're going to have to be hard, Marin. They're going to try to guilt you, manipulate you, make you feel like you stole something that was never yours. Your mother will cry. Your father will threaten. Connor will rage. And you're going to have to stand there and hold the line. I will. I know you will. She smiled again. That's why I chose you. We sat together until the sun finished setting. Then the nurse came in to adjust her medications, and I slipped out quietly. The house was nearly empty now. Mom and Dad had retreated to their guest room. Connor was long gone. Most of the guests had evaporated. I found Nolan on the back patio, staring at the bay. You should get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's going to be another day. He was right. But I wasn't tired. I was buzzing with the strange energy that comes after something huge has happened, when your body hasn't caught up to your brain yet. I'm going to go for a walk, I said. Clear my head. He nodded. Don't stay out too late. It's going to rain. I walked down to the dock behind the house and sat on the edge, feet dangling over the water. The bay was calm, reflecting the lights of the houses along the shore. It smelled like salt and jasmine and something else I couldn't name, but remembered from childhood. I thought about the little girl who used to sit in this exact spot, dreaming about getting away. She'd wanted so badly to be seen, to matter, to be more than Connor's shadow. And eventually she'd given up on that and just decided to leave instead. Now I was back, and the world had rearranged itself around me without my permission. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I mostly just felt tired and a little sad and very, very aware that nothing would ever be the same. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. Connor." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I blocked the number and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The rain started falling about an hour later. I walked back up to the house, let myself in quietly, and went to sleep in my old bedroom for the first time in 8 years. The next morning, I found Mom waiting for me in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold, no makeup, hair flat, looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "We need to talk," she said. I poured my own coffee and sat down across from her. She stared at me for a long moment, eyes red and puffy. Then she said, "I know you think I'm the villain here. I know you think your father and I favored Connor and neglected you and never appreciated anything you did. I waited. But you don't understand what it was like," she continued. "Connor was difficult. From the time he was little, he needed constant attention, constant reinforcement. If we didn't give it to him, he'd act out, get in trouble, make scenes. It was easier to just keep him happy. So you made him the center of everything." She flinched. "We were trying to manage him." "No," I said quietly. "You were enabling him, and you were doing it at my expense." Tears started rolling down her cheeks again. "I know you didn't mean to," I interrupted. "That's the worst part. You didn't even notice. You were so busy catering to Connor that you forgot I existed. And when I tried to point it out, you made me feel like I was being selfish, like wanting attention from my own parents was some kind of character flaw." She was crying openly now. "We didn't know. We didn't realize. You didn't want to know. There's a difference." She put her face in her hands and sobbed. I sat there and let her. After a while, she looked up again, mascara streaming, voice broken. "Can you ever forgive us?" I took a breath. "I don't know. But I'm not going to give back the properties just to make you feel better. That's not what I'm asking." "Isn't it?" She didn't answer. I stood up. "I'm going to go see Grandma. We can talk more later." I left her there at the table, crying into her cold coffee, and walked out. Grandma Eleanor was sitting up in bed when I came in, eating oatmeal and watching the news. She looked better than she had the night before. More color in her cheeks. "You survived the night," she said. "That's a good sign." Mom tried to talk to me. Grandma nodded like she'd expected that. "Let me guess. Crying. Self-justification. Asking you to forgive and forget. Pretty much." She snorted. "Catherine's specialty. She thinks if she cries enough, the problem will go away. She's been doing that her whole life." I sat down in the chair beside her bed. "What should I do? About your mother?" "Nothing. You don't owe her anything right now. She needs to sit with this, feel the weight of it. If you let her off the hook too quickly, she'll just go back to the same patterns." I nodded. Grandma set down her oatmeal spoon. "Now, let's talk about what happens next." Over the next hour, she laid it out for me. The properties, the tenants, the financials, the property management company she'd been thinking about starting, the timeline for renovation she'd been planning before Connor started draining the accounts. She'd thought about all of it, every detail. For 4 years, she'd been sitting on this plan, waiting for the right moment to hand it over. And now she was handing it over like passing a baton in a race she knew she wouldn't be around to finish. "You have about 6 months of cleanup work," she said. "Getting Connor's name off everything, auditing the books, making sure the tenants know who they're dealing with now. After that, the properties basically run themselves if you've got good people managing them. I'll need to hire new property managers." "You will?" She smiled slightly. "Don't hire anyone who reminds you of Connor." I almost laughed. She took my hand again. "You're going to be good at this, Maureen. You've always been good at this. You just needed someone to give you the chance." I looked at her. This tiny, fierce woman who'd just upended an entire family's expectations because she saw me when no one else did. "Thank you," I said, "for believing in me." I wasn't believing. I was seeing. She squeezed my hand. That's all I ever did. Saw what was really there. My phone buzzed. A text from Nolan. "Connor's here. With Dad. They want to talk." Grandma saw my face change. "Go," she said. "Handle it. What if I don't know what to say? You will." She smiled. "You always have. You just never had anyone listening." I found them in the living room. Connor sitting on the couch, leg bouncing with nervous energy. Dad standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the yard like he wanted to be anywhere else. Connor looked up when I walked in. His eyes were red, face puffy. He'd been crying too. "Marin," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Can we talk?" I didn't sit. "Go ahead." He swallowed hard. "I know I messed up. I know I took money I shouldn't have. I was in over my head. There were debts. I made bad decisions. And I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. But you didn't pay it back," I interrupted. "You just kept taking. I know. I know I did." He put his face in his hands. "But I'm not a bad person, Mare. I lost my way. You stole $700,000 from an 87-year-old woman who trusted you." He looked up, tears streaming. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. Just don't press charges. Please. It'll ruin my life." I stared at him for a long moment. This was the brother who'd taken everything while I took nothing, who'd basked in praise while I learned to survive on the scraps, who'd assumed his whole life that he was entitled to whatever he wanted just because he wanted it. And now he was asking me for mercy. "It's not my decision," I said finally. "You didn't steal from me. You stole from Grandma. If you want forgiveness, you need to ask her." His face crumpled. "She won't even look at me." "Then I guess you have your answer." Dad finally spoke up from the window. "Marin, don't be cruel. He's your brother." I turned to him. Was he my brother when he was stealing? When he was letting everyone treat me like I didn't exist? When he stood in that room yesterday and announced that I deserved nothing? Dad didn't answer. "You don't get to show up now and ask me to be merciful," I said. "Not when you spent 30 years teaching him that mercy was something he was owed instead of something he earned." That landed. I could see it in his face. Connor stood up, shaking. "So that's it? You're just going to let me go to prison?" "I don't know what's going to happen to you," I said. "But I know that for once, you're going to face the consequences of what you did. And I know that I'm not going to feel guilty about it." He stared at me with something that looked like hatred. Then he walked past me, out the door, and was gone. Dad lingered a moment longer. "You've changed," he said quietly. "No," I said. "I've just stopped pretending to be okay with everything." He left without another word. I stood alone in the living room for a long time after that, thinking about the family I'd grown up in, and the family I'd become, thinking about what it means to be seen, to be valued, to be trusted, and thinking about Grandma Eleanor, upstairs in her bed, waiting for me to come back and tell her what happened. I went back up and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You did exactly right. He's my brother." "He was your brother," she corrected. "Now he's someone who betrayed you. Those aren't the same thing." I nodded slowly. "Family," she said, "is not just blood. It's trust. It's showing up. It's protecting each other, not preying on each other. By that definition, Connor stopped being your family a long time ago, and your parents stopped being mine." Her face was calm, resolved. "I didn't want it to end this way," she continued. "I hoped until the last moment that I was wrong about him, but I wasn't. And once I knew that, I had to act on it, no matter who got hurt. I understood that. I was beginning to understand a lot of things." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "you go back to Charlotte. You start the transition. You become who you were always supposed to be." She smiled slightly. And you let me rest. I've done my part. That stopped me. Grandma, I'm tired, Marin. She wasn't complaining, just stating a fact. I've been holding on for this, making sure it was done right. Now it's done. And I'd like to rest. I felt my eyes sting. I'll come back, I said. I'll visit every month. I know you will. She squeezed my hand. But don't put your life on hold for me. I've lived mine. Now you go live yours. I stayed with her for another hour. We didn't talk about the properties or the family or any of it. We just sat together, watching the light change on the water, being in the same space. When I left that afternoon, she was asleep. I kissed her forehead and let myself out quietly. 3 months later, the dust had settled, but nothing was the same. 3 months later, the dust had settled, but nothing was the same. Connor's name disappeared from every lease, every account, every document connected to the 12 properties. Tenants received new payment instructions with my name and contact information. Most of them didn't notice the change. Rent stayed the same, repairs got done properly, and nobody tried to charge them for work that was never performed. The IRS notice arrived 6 weeks after the will reading. Turns out years of claiming personal expenses as business deductions, writing off vacations as property inspections, listing his sports car as a company vehicle, it all finally caught up with him. They froze his remaining accounts and began a formal audit. I don't know all the details. I stopped tracking Connor's implosion after the first month. But from what Nolan tells me, he's facing potential tax fraud charges. He lost his job when his employer found out, and he's been couch surfing with various friends who are quickly running out of patience. Paige made it official. She sent back the ring by certified mail, no note. Then she posted a very pointed Instagram story about removing toxic people from your life that got about 400 likes. I didn't follow her, but Nolan screenshotted it and sent it to me with a laughing emoji. Mom and Dad put their house on the market. The big place in Clearwater, the one where we grew up, went up for sale at the end of the first month. Too many memories, Mom said. I don't know where they ended up. I haven't asked. They tried reaching out a few times. Voicemails from Mom, crying, asking me to call. Texts from Dad, increasingly formal, talking about family reconciliation and mediated conversations. I didn't respond to any of them. It's not that I hate them. I don't. But I also don't trust them. And I'm not sure I ever will again. They had 30 years to see me, to value me, to treat me like I mattered. They chose not to. I don't owe them a redemption arc just because they finally realized they lost. Nolan and I talk every couple of weeks. He's the only one I kept in contact with. He never asked for anything, never tried to guilt me, never made excuses for anyone. He just checked in, asked how I was doing, sent the occasional meme. That's what family should feel like. The properties are doing well. Better than well, actually. I brought in a new management company, one run by people who return phone calls and don't invent repairs. We did a full audit of the books and found even more discrepancies than Grandma Eleanor had documented. Not huge amounts, but enough to confirm that Connor had been skimming in ways we hadn't even discovered. All of that's cleaned up now. Vacancies are down, tenant satisfaction is up, and every month the income deposits into my account clean and consistent. 12 properties, 47 businesses, over 200 jobs, all of it running the way it should have been running all along. I bought a small office building in Charlotte last month. My first acquisition since taking over the Florida portfolio. It felt like a milestone, like I was finally becoming the person Grandma Eleanor saw when she looked at me. She passed quietly 8 weeks ago. I was there. I'd been flying down every other weekend, spending time with her, going over the properties, just sitting together. She liked having me there, even when she was too tired to talk. The last conversation we had, she held my hand and said, "You turned out exactly how I hoped." I told her I loved her. She smiled and said, "I know. That's why I trusted you." The funeral was small. Just a few people from her church. A handful of tenants who wanted to pay respects. Nolan and me. Mom and Dad weren't there. I didn't invite them, and they didn't ask. Connor didn't show up either, but I didn't expect him to. I gave the eulogy. I talked about who she really was. Not the matriarch of a dynasty. Not the source of an inheritance, but a woman who paid attention. Who saw clearly when everyone else was performing. Who protected what she built by giving it to someone who would protect it too. When I finished, one of her church friends came up to me and said, "She talked about you all the time. She was so proud of you." That hit harder than I expected. I had to go sit in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive home. After the service, the attorney read the rest of the will. There wasn't much left since most of the assets had already been transferred. But there was a letter. Grandma Eleanor had written it a year ago and instructed Mr. Whitmore to give it to me after she was gone. I didn't open it at the attorney's office. I waited until I was back in Charlotte, sitting on my townhouse patio, alone. It said, "Marin, if you're reading this, then it's done. The properties are yours. The family knows the truth. And I'm not there to see what happens next. That's probably for the best. I've never been good at watching people be disappointed. I want you to understand why I did what I did, in case I wasn't clear enough when I was alive. It wasn't to punish Connor. I loved that boy, even when he made it hard. But love doesn't mean letting someone destroy what you've built. And it doesn't mean letting them destroy themselves either. If I had given him those properties, he would have lost them within 5 years. Sold them off, spent the money, and had nothing left to show for any of it. By giving them to you, I didn't just protect the properties. I protected him from making that mistake. Not that he'll see it that way. He'll probably hate me forever. That's fine. I've lived long enough to know that doing the right thing and being thanked for it are two different things. But you see it. You've always seen it. That's why I chose you. You were never the invisible one, Marin. You were the one who didn't need to make noise to be real. You were the one who built a life without anyone's help and never complained about it. You were the one who came home when I asked and never made me feel like a burden. That's not invisibility. That's strength. That's character. That's exactly what I needed in someone to carry this forward. So don't let anyone make you feel guilty about what you've received. You didn't take anything from Connor. You earned this by being someone worth trusting, and he lost it by being someone who wasn't. Take care of those properties. Take care of those tenants. Build something that lasts. And every once in a while, sit on a porch with a glass of something cold and think of me. I'll be there in the humidity and the jasmine and the sound of the water. I'm proud of you. I always was. Love, Grandma Eleanor. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I folded it up, put it in the fireproof folder with all the deeds and trust documents, and set it on the top shelf of my closet where it belongs. 6 months out now, and the silence from my family has become normal. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I blocked most of them anyway, so I wouldn't know if they tried. The only exception is Nolan, and he respects the boundaries I've set. Sometimes I wonder if they think about me. If Mom cries about losing her daughter. If Dad regrets all the conversations we never had. If Connor still blames me for everything instead of looking in the mirror. But mostly, I don't wonder. Because it doesn't change anything. I spent too many years of my life wondering what they thought of me. Trying to earn attention that was never going to come. I'm done with that now. Whatever they feel, they feel. It doesn't have anything to do with me anymore. I've been building my own life. The Charlotte office building is fully leased. I started consulting for other women-owned property firms in the Southeast, sharing what I've learned about due diligence and trust structures, and how to protect your assets from people who smile while they rob you. I joined a board. I started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in Pinellas County in Grandma Eleanor's name. And every month, the rental income lands in my account, clean and quiet, the way it's supposed to. 12 properties, 47 businesses, 200-something people who get to keep their jobs because someone is finally managing things the way they should be managed. I don't visit Florida much anymore. The memories are too complicated. But last month I drove down and walked through one of the strip malls, the first property Grandma Eleanor ever bought back in 1986. The tenants didn't know who I was. Just a woman walking around looking at storefronts. A bakery, a nail salon, a little insurance office. Ordinary businesses run by ordinary people just trying to make a living. That's what Grandma Eleanor understood, and what Connor never did. These properties aren't trophies. They're not status symbols. They're responsibilities. People depend on them. And when you inherit something like that, you don't get to treat it like a piggy bank. I stood in the parking lot for a while, looking at the building. It needed new paint. I made a note to have the management company take care of it. Then I got in my car and drove home. If you've ever had to choose between the family you were born into and the peace you built for yourself, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't standing up for yourself. It's staying standing when everyone you ever loved is trying to knock you down. Grandma Eleanor was right. Paper beats promises every single time. And some doors, once you close them, need to stay closed for good. If this story helped you or made you feel less alone, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I share stories like this every week, about the families we survive and the lives we build after. And if you're in the middle of your own battle right now, fighting for what's yours against people who should have been on your side, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not selfish. You're not the problem. You're just finally seeing clearly. And that clarity is worth more than anything they could have given you. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, the people who really love you don't make you fight for scraps. I'll see you in the next one.